All right, man, we're live. We welcome to Residing in North Idaho, folks. I've got Dan Wilson today. He's running for Kootenai County Sheriff. And, I wanted to have you on. This was in the works because Bob Norris was on, and I think everybody should have an opportunity and a platform to kind of get out there. Hang on a sec. Let me readjust here. My mic's getting flaccid. Pardon that, people. There we go. Okay. Give everybody the opportunity. So here we go, dude. We finally made it happen. I was supposed to have one of my partners and everybody was traveling and I got tired of rescheduling and I was like, no, I can't do that to you again. Let's just go. So you and me, dude.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And it's an honor to be on your show.
Yeah. You look like my big brother over there. Hold on. I got to sit a little taller.
He's that ugly, huh?
Yeah. It's good. The other guys aren't here. They're a tad shorter than me. So they look really small on camera. So this is good. You make me look small. So gosh, dude, where do we start? I guess give me the story of your background and then we'll kind of dive into what makes you want to run for sheriff. Sure. And then I have some questions from folks in the, from the law enforcement sector in this community that wanted me to ask you some of these questions. So we'll dive into that stuff too.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, where are you from? What do you do? What did you do? Tell me about yourself, dude.
I am from Spokane Valley, Washington, originally. I moved to Idaho 3 years ago. Well, I guess it's now 4, the end of 2020.
Yeah, me too.
But I was a 4th generation Wilson to grow up on the original Antone Plant homestead, which he was the very first settler. He was a trapper and lived in the Spokane Valley before the Civil War. And then my grandfather, Fred, who would be my great-grandfather, purchased that homestead in the late 20s, early 30s. And, the rest is history. The original way station that he operated, that was part of my grandparents' barn. So the significance on the history of that property to even the Coeur d'Alene area is that the Mullen Trail ran right through the property. And Field Governor Stevens and Chief Gary and Mullen and some of the greats would actually converge up there at that property as they were surveying for the railroad. So so that's where I grew up in the 80s and the 90s.
Best time to grow up, in my opinion.
It was. And, I was a homeschool kid. And so in 1984, my parents decided that homeschooling was just barely legal in Washington State. So they had been listening to a James Dobson broadcast, and the topic was brought up. So next thing you know, my mom and dad are pulling me out of school in 2nd grade, halfway through, and said, you're going to come into the kitchen and here's your books and we're going to start this new experiment. Now, you want to talk about feeling ostracized? I mean, back in the 80s, and I think we're probably similar in age, but back in the 80s, you were that really odd dude, and homeschoolers were kind of weird.
That was prior to it becoming more normalized. Yes. Oh, totally. Yeah. Oh, did you live on like a large chunk of land?
We did not. My grandparents owned approximately 25 acres on that homestead.
Okay.
And then we were not able to build on that property due to zoning, and you know how that goes.
Yep.
So I lived a short ways across the valley, and but we spent a lot of our time at grandparents' place. And then I purchased my great aunt's house, which was part of that homestead.
Cool.
So I lived up there for 18 years until I made the move to Idaho, and it was a great thing. But so homeschool kid from 1984 to 93. I graduated as a homeschool kid. I started my construction apprenticeship at 16 years old, actually in Kootenai County. Mm-hmm. And the first house that I was a part of building actually still stands off 16th and 41 in front of Real Life. So that was back when the prairie was, mostly horse pastures and hay fields, and the expansion like we've seen now is nowhere near what it is. So much more built up than 30 something years ago.
Right.
Went through carpentry apprenticeship, played in a country band, played on the road for a while.
Really?
Yeah. It was a Liberty country band, and my kid brother is a actual famous fiddle player. He plays in with big name Nashville acts.
No kidding, dude. Yeah. So what'd you play? Guitar or fiddle? Or
we started playing the fiddle. I started playing the fiddle, but I didn't like the fiddle. I wanted to play guitar.
I feel like that thing would look tiny in your hands.
Well, I just was not very coordinated with the fiddle. We took piano lessons for many, many years. Yeah. My dad said one summer, hey, guess what? You're off piano lessons. Now you're going to take fiddle. So I was told I'm playing the fiddle. And eventually my brother, who was way more, talented when it comes to musical instruments, he picked up the fiddle, I took the guitar, and then we started, doing the typical family reunions and old people's homes. And then eventually we ran into other really talented musicians, and that led me to being part of the Liberty Country Band in the late 90s. And then I was signed to a little label in the 90s and was supposed to go to Nashville. And obviously I was so good that I was a carpenter and a cop. So
it didn't work out. So let me backtrack. So you had, not only were you a homeschool kid back in that time, but you're also fiddle player. Is that like 2 strikes against you? It's thank goodness you're a big dude.
If I was a banjo player, it would be worse, but yeah. So, I had a lot of fun as a kid, and I was going through this carpentry apprenticeship, transferred to a union apprenticeship. So it was a formal state recognized journeyman carpenter apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And then I got married somewhere in there and started having a bunch of kids. And
how many kids you got total?
I have 5.
Oh, that's good. That's a gang.
Yeah. And my youngest is 16 and my oldest is 25. So, they're all over the spectrum. But so I finished up my carpentry apprenticeship, was married, and really needed to put the music thing away and decided not to move to Nashville. I started a construction company, and that construction company is still in business today. So
you guys do work on both sides of the border? Or?
We do. In fact, we work in Montana, Idaho, Washington. We do have some products that go down to Oregon as well. So we have a commercial construction company specializing in medical tenant improvement and small government projects. So we have contracts with the Department of Defense, state of Washington, counties. We take care of one of the largest healthcare providers, the east side of the Rockies, or east side of the Cascades, rather. So we also have a commercial cabinet shop that was part of the construction company, was its own company for about 15 years. And then last year we brought it back under the umbrella of the construction company. So,
nice.
So that's kind of a big flyby on the career side of things.
Yeah.
In 2011, both businesses were doing so well that I did not have to be there every single day, and decided that I wanted to go back and pursue law enforcement.
Yeah.
So
that's something that always called to you?
Yeah. I think from a very young age, I had a love of protecting people and going after injustice. I think you would have the same similar tendencies.
It's a calling, right? It's like it'll nag at you. I think, certain people are just built that way, and it will always be there. So I get that for sure.
Yeah. So in 2011, I was accepted into the Spokane Police Department's Reserve Academy.
Okay.
Graduated from that and was a certified commissioned reserve police officer with the state of Washington. Worked with Spokane for about 4 years, and then was recruited out to Liberty Lake. And I spent the last 8 years before I retired in March of last year as a reserve officer, single car status.
What is the life? I think some people don't know, those that aren't in that field, like what's the life of a reserve? What do you get paid? Like, what are the shifts like? How's that work?
It depends on the agency. So there are some areas in Washington state that the reserve is a paid position.
Yeah. For
the city of Spokane, as well as Liberty Lake, it was 100% volunteer. So there was no payment of any sorts.
Can I just say that does say something about your character, because there's no way in hell I'd do that job for free, brother.
Yeah. I get it.
The situations you get in, many a time I'm like, wow, thankfully I was well paid where I worked, and I was like, that's tough.
It is. And of course, where I was working with Spokane, we had great mentorships.
Yeah.
Great guys that I was working and learning from. When I went out to Liberty Lake, the calls for service, much different, a lot more laid back. But I learned so much great principles and patrol procedures when I was working with the city of Spokane, where, we might be down 4 reports and you're getting another big one, and it's call to call to call. But in Washington, specifically for us as reserves, it's predominantly volunteer. And I was able to put in thousands of hours to the community, strapping on the Kevlar vest and wearing the shield and put the gun belt on. And, if I caught them, I cleaned them. So, it was basic patrolman 101.
Yeah. Wow, man. Yeah. I don't know if I'd do it for a volunteer status.
Well, it was getting more and more difficult because the laws changed against law enforcement so drastically in Washington state after 2020,
right?
After George Floyd, a lot of knee-jerk reactions. petitions as well as legislation that changed. I mean, there was at one point where you could not use force on somebody if you didn't have probable cause. And
Yeah.
right. How risky is that?
So now you're in a reactive state all the time, which already the job is fairly reactive. And it's like, that's super stressful. I would definitely be, and this started to happen in California where I work too, is the liability, man. Like you're, and to be a volunteer and then face that same liability. Like, hey, what if I get in a shooting? What if I have use of force? What if I get in a car crash? And now I'm stuck dealing with that.
Yeah, and that really was probably the impetus for me exiting in 23. Owning the businesses, I did not want to put myself at any more risk because of the anti-law enforcement culture that Washington State had become. Yeah. You know, the last year, I don't think I self-initiated anything.
Yeah,
I
don't blame you.
Response only. And, you know, we had PORAC, which is what peace officers of Riverside or whatever. It's that insurance pool. Yep. But you know, when I asked specifically, what does it cover and what doesn't, everybody's kind of going like this. And I had it with our general counsel. And after a while, we just said, hey, it's not worth the litigious world that we live in to continue putting the businesses at risk.
Yeah. So is this what drives your desire to run for Kootenai County Sheriff?
Actually, not at all.
Oh,
so the desire to be a sheriff was not even on my horizon. Yeah. I'm happily employed in my companies. I enjoy life. I've got a nice house. You know, I have hobbies that I enjoy, but I was actually at a town hall event for state legislators about 2 years ago. And I saw Bob Norris, the current sheriff, addressing, you know, the gathering that had took place there where people had come to listen to what the legislators were doing during session. Yeah. And he commandeered the mic from the MC and he went on this kind of blaming rant against the state reps, talking about he couldn't adequately do his job because they weren't giving him enough funding. Yeah. And I looked at my wife, Donna, and I was shocked because I'm certain you have seen many sheriffs in your day. Yeah. And, you know, that sheriff has to be a strong individual with command presence and, you know, the ability to lead people in every environment, speak truth, but not be somebody that lays blame.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I think sheriffs are one of the most important thing out there because they are an elected official. And it's like that, and they have a lot of power. And I hate to see, I know there are some states that they are no longer elected or something.
Yeah, they're appointed.
Yeah. And
Kootenai County actually looked at that a form of government a couple of years ago where they would appoint the sheriff. And that's a bad thing. I hate that
idea, right? You know, police chiefs, I've seen it multiple times where I worked in cities around where I worked where, you know, they are at the will of city council or even the governor in some cases. And now they're doing things that, you know, as a boot officer was like, no, that's crap.
And the sheriff is the last line of defense for the people. Right. I mean, we know this has become more and more of a focal point. When I was a kid, people didn't know what the difference was between a deputy and a police officer. Yeah. Right. They call 911. They expect somebody with a badge to show up.
100%.
And so, you know, even to this day, there's a lot of people, even in our own community, that don't understand that the sheriff is an elected position, chief law enforcement entity in the county. Yep. And in Idaho, there's only 3 things that are required to be a sheriff. One, you have to be 21 years of age, a citizen of the United States, and you have to live in the county that you're running for at least a year. And the idea is that you don't necessarily need a tenured law enforcement professional to fill that representative position. Yeah. And it does come in handy, obviously. I mean, I'm not diminishing that, but even the state understands the importance of having an elected official that is from among the people.
Right. I was doing some research on Kootenai County recently, and I discovered that Wyatt Earp was actually a Kootenai County sheriff for a little while.
He was when he was, you know, pursuing gold.
Yeah, I thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, oh, there's the lineage right there. Yeah, Wyatt Earp. So you are obviously a resident of Kootenai County now. You've been for a few years, and then man, it seems like it takes a lot to step up and see an issue and want to get into serving the public in that way, especially when you're super busy. So, I mean, I guess like, what are some of the values what are the things that you value that you want to bring to this?
Yeah. Well, I believe that is leadership. Are you a fan of Jocko?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Jocko and extreme ownership is something that I adopted several years ago after reading his book, Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
And all of our employees go through the Echelon Front Extreme Ownership academies. So we pay for all of our employees to continually go through this extreme ownership leadership management style, which is allowing your people to become leaders in their own spheres, so that they can be the best that they can be within whatever capacity that they're working. And I believe in it so much. We have seen the net results of that leadership style, where we decentralize, we communicate up and down the chain of command. We are a cohesive group. In fact, we're doing a project right now where it's night work and it's a pharmacy remodel, tight timelines, tight schedules. And one of our team members went down with the flu. And we have such a great team that we have other individuals that can immediately rise up, take over his position, and it's seamless. There is no abandoning the mission of taking care of the project that we have. So, the leadership style that I bring is, I think, unique. It's from a businessman standpoint, not tainted by career law enforcement. You're a businessman. You understand how the dollars and cents, when you are in charge of them because it's your own dollars, it's far different than when it's coming from the taxpayer.
Yeah. Let's be real. It's my wife that does all that. I'm just a knucklehead dude, but
You're very successful, brother.
Thank you. I owe that to other
people. And you are deadly on the mat.
Maybe. It depends. Thank you though. I appreciate that. So, okay. This is good. I guess, shifting gears here a little bit. I know, like I said, I haven't been on social media a lot myself. I know it seems like that. Yeah. I am personally not on there. Stuff gets posted. What's some of the pushback that you're getting?
No command experience.
Okay.
So guys are saying, and it's predominantly former Los Angeles County sheriff's deputies and their families that are very close to the current sheriff. And they're the ones that seem to be continually saying, you have no command experience, you have no ability to lead, the barrage of typical things. And again, that is not true. Now, I may not have command level experience, but I've run two highly successful construction companies for almost 25 years.
Right.
I've hired, I've fired, I've negotiated contracts. I have that administrative background. But you have to understand, too, that in the role of the sheriff as a representative, you're not the one that's pulling the strings every single day in the sheriff's office. That falls to the responsibility of the undersheriff. And the undersheriff, even our current one, retired from Santa Ana as a corporal. So he wasn't even, he was he was line level supervision. He wasn't even, a captain, lieutenant, or of a traditional command staff structure. So, that's some of the pushback. They will say, well, you don't understand how things operate. Look, I spent 12 years in law enforcement. I have a pretty good idea how things run.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying basically is, and this is the reality of it, you don't need to know how to do every job, right? Somebody knows how to do that.
Yes.
This is a management position to manage those people. And then it all filters downhill from there.
Yeah. And of course, coming into this, I have been mentored by former undersheriffs of very large counties. And jail captains. So I've surrounded myself already, similar to what I do in my actual, business world, where I understand how to get key individuals that know how to do things to advise me and to execute and make things happen. So I have no concern whatsoever walking into the sheriff's office in January of 2025 and getting ready to go to business.
Yeah. What's the first thing you do?
Well, I think the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to go to the county commissioners and ask for a full budget to allow a forensic audit of the office from top to bottom.
Yeah.
As a business guy, if you don't know where your money's going, how do you actually know how to direct things?
Right.
We need to find out if there's waste, if there's areas where we can allocate budgets from one fund to another. Also, we're obviously going to be sitting down with all of the deputies and we're going to be listening to their stories.
Yeah.
We're going to find out what is it, and Jocko talks about this. We get down there at the line level and ask the questions. What's going well? What is not going well? And then we start working on plans in order to right things that are wrong, if they truly are wrong, and helping the deputies, the employees, be able to get ownership in what their sphere of influence is. And we start building a cohesive team that way.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I know a few guys that work over there, but what's the culture like there now? Are you in touch with guys there?
I am.
Yeah. Do they support the current sheriff? Do they support you? What's the deal there?
So it's a mixed bag. Of course, the folks that have come to us and had the conversations, including people that are outside law enforcement, but have an intimate relationship with the sheriff's office, that have been here for years, and they know where all the bodies are, and they know the way the dysfunctions are being swept over.
Yep.
But specifically, there is a divide in the sheriff's office right now. There are those that are in the camp of Bob Norris and those that aren't, and there is no in between. Mm-hmm. And if you're not in Bob Norris's camp, you're ostracized. You're out in the cold. And I think that's a very dangerous environment to have with any organization. Look, I do not surround myself with yes men. If you can't have opposition telling you things that they don't agree with, what good does that do as a whole, right?
Yeah.
And just because somebody doesn't agree with me does not mean that they have no place in the organization. And I think it's punitive, but we need to get rid of the nepotism. And if you look at the Deputy Sheriff's Association, they recently, Bob has claimed that he received 93% support from the deputy sheriffs. There's two things that need to be asked. One, how can it be 93% when you have approximately 170 voting members and less than 130 actually voted? I mean, by my math, and I'm a homeschool kid, it's about 26% that did not vote for endorsing Bob. And the second thing is, nobody has asked this question, but it's been brought to my attention that there was no paper ballot actually given to those voting. So, numbers can always be abused and used however you want them, but I can assure you that the cohesiveness of the sheriff's office in every department, whether it's dispatch, jail, patrol, is not what we're being told.
Yeah. What are some of the gripes that the guys at the office have? Like, is it pay? Is it resource, like car? I know where, my department, it was cars all the time.
Yeah.
Never enough
right.
cars.
Pool cars suck, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's not only that, it's forced overtime. It's, pay discrepancies between dispatch versus jail, forced overtime in the jail, dangerous working conditions. Again, there are promotions that are given to loyal sheriff supporters versus those that aren't. So there's a culture in there of divisiveness.
Yeah. So changing the culture is critical. I mean,
and I know every sheriff says we're going to change the culture.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's
a big task when you're looking at a jail and patrol and admin, and you know what I mean? Like that's a big deal. Is that where you bring in the principles of extreme ownership and try to build that culture up?
Yeah. And I also think you said it best earlier. Law enforcement is a calling.
Yeah.
You either are called or you're not. And if you're there solely for the paycheck, then your motives are wrong.
Yeah.
However, business owner, I know that my greatest assets are my people. It's not any piece of equipment. It's not a tool. It is my people. And if you do not take care of your people, give them everything that they need to safely and effectively do their job, well, then you're not taking care of the most important thing that you need to be doing. And, I believe that people in law enforcement need to be fairly compensated for the services that they provide.
Yeah. How do you handle the recruitment issues? I know everybody's having it.
Yeah. I mean, the recruitment issues are not just unique to law enforcement.
Right.
I was having this conversation. I had the conversation not too long ago with a couple guys, actually a sergeant from the jail. And the comment was, well, what are you going to do to get us more guys? Well, look, this issue in law enforcement and the culture of America right now towards law enforcement did not happen in 2 years. This has been a slow decline since you and I first got into patrol, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't something that we're going to fix merely in 1 or 2 years. You have a small sphere of people to fill out a wide space. And in the business world, you have to recruit key good employees from other areas that they're employed. You have to entice them in. It's not always money. I mean, money is definitely a driving force where somebody wants to come to work for you. But at the same time, there are places where you can make bank, but if the culture is rotten, and if you don't like where you're working, the trade-off is not worth it. So it's a balance between bringing in individuals that get compensated fairly with their skill set, but also are there for the culture. And one of the I guess the areas where we've talked about the recruitment problem is kids today don't understand the common sense things that you and I hopefully knew at the same age.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine over in Spokane County is in charge of their training and recruitment, Tony. And he and I have had these conversations for about 2 to 3 years. They get a whole pool of, candidates, and they will try to pre-screen them by giving them some basic, I guess, actions to take. They'll take a group of kids out to a mall and say, okay, go strike up a conversation with this random person.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't actually have a conversation.
Can I text
them? Right. And nobody's been punched in the face. So, I mean, you have a bunch of these kids that are timid. They're 21, 22 going on 15.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge issue. And, combine that with now drug use. I mean, the pool for qualified individuals to be cops is getting smaller and smaller. So I think it's something that we have to start looking at across the country to say, what things with our current state can we allow somebody to have in their background while still maintaining the integrity of the badge?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what I would do is I would sell, you don't have to sell the job here. You have to sell North Idaho to other agencies and pull in laterals because you got guys coming up with, potentially tons of experience. And I think it's a huge asset. So, that's what we do in real estate. Like, we don't sell houses, we sell the community, and that attracts the right people. I get crap on YouTube a lot because, don't bring more Californians here. Well, hey, the Californians that are coming here are super conservative and they're running away from the nonsense that happens there. They don't want anything to do with that. So we're bringing good people. And I think if you applied that same principle to, hiring laterals, that might avoid that issue of dealing with these young 21-year-olds. Cause we had the same, I worked in backgrounds in CHP before I left for a year, and same issues, man. Like, you got these kids that have never had a job, lived in mom's house until they're 21, never even drank alcohol. And I'm like, you can't. Like, you can't. You're so naive. No life experience at all. Your first job is going to be a gun and a badge and a car that goes 120 miles an hour. Hell no.
And then going to a DV.
Yeah.
And you've never had a steady girlfriend. I mean,
that's a problem.
So, laterals, I think you're exactly right on the laterals. I know that since 2021, Kootenai has brought in approximately 25 laterals.
That's
so
amount,
the number is significant.
Yeah.
And but that's kind of what I was saying earlier. When you recruit from other agencies, you have to have something, and you articulated it better by selling North Idaho. And I do think that there is a draw here. The problem also is the cost of housing, right?
So true. And then the pay isn't quite balancing out. Right. So I guess that's another issue. Like, is that something you're willing to take on, is working to get these guys and gals better pay?
Yeah. As I said earlier, we have to take care of our people.
Yeah.
And if we cannot provide them a living wage and benefits, then nobody's going to stay. We know that human nature is it's fun, but there has to be a price that's associated with
even
that.
If the career calls you still got to pay the bills.
But part of what I've also been concerned about is the constant, cry for raising taxes. And I don't know about you, but I'm a property owner here and I'm a business owner in the state of Idaho. I don't want to be paying a lot more taxes. I have stated for over a year that one of my priorities is to bring a deputy reserve program specifically to the sheriff's office. Now, I was given flack at the very beginning and told you can't do that. In fact, Bruce Matari and I had a conversation when he was actually running for commissioner. So he had been Bob's campaign manager, and then he was running for county commissioner, and he flat out told me that reserves were a waste of time and money. So I find it hilarious that now all of a sudden during campaign season, they're hot to trot to find, reserve deputies. But the reality of it is we don't have to bring in brand new recruits. similar to what you just said earlier.
Yeah.
We don't have to run a reserve academy, which, contrary to what's being said, because I have spoken with Post North and read through the Idaho statute for Post, we definitely can have a reserve program where we bring qualified, recently separated law enforcement professionals after the basic background checks and the application, this typical entry process. If they're within 5 years, they can challenge Post and come right on.
I guarantee you will pull some people that way, because I say it all the time. North Idaho is cop land. It is like the highest concentration of retired law enforcement anywhere in the world. I'm confident of that.
Yeah, I believe
it. So, you know what I mean? Even if you pulled a very small percentage of those people, you'd get some qualified folks.
Look, Spokane City runs a reserve officer program. It brings $800,000 worth of volunteer service to the city of Spokane.
Yeah.
It is. And when you're talking about guys that spent 20, 30 years down in California or Texas, these are professionals that aren't just the mall cops that reserves oftentimes get accused of being. So you get a guy that, is on retirement, doesn't necessarily have to pull a paycheck. And he says, hey, I actually believe enough in my community that I want to help out the county that I live. And I think that if we structure it well enough, we can bring in all sorts of recruits for not just patrol. I mean, there's lots of other areas that people can serve. And I've been accused because of some earlier posts that I'm anti-California cops. Absolutely no truth to it whatsoever. I want the Idaho culture to remain the same Idaho culture that I remember as a kid. But if you are a good individual, as you said earlier, people that are fleeing from these blue states, their exodus is to a place of freedom.
Right.
I saw 20 plus years ago the balkanization of the country start, and key people, good people who didn't necessarily know each other or weren't joined together, started showing up in Kootenai County. My belief is that Kootenai County has a great destiny ahead of it. I think that Kootenai County can become the safest, most secure county in the entire country. We can be that shining city on a hill for all other counties across our great United States to say, this is what happens when you bring the responsibility right down to the county level instead of always looking at the state and the federal. So I agree. Cops here, we got some great people here.
Yeah. The ones I've met and I know are solid folks for sure. Let's talk about crime in Kootenai. I imagine you explore this a little bit. Sure. What are some of the bigger issues Kootenai County is facing right now as far as crime?
Well, property crimes are huge, as well as, drug offenses. And so everything drug related and property crime, as you well know, starts with the drug issues. And where does the drug issue start? At the border.
Yeah.
Recently, my wife and I went down and met with Sheriff Lamb of Pinal County, Arizona, to see firsthand in January what was going on at the unsecured Arizona border. So his son, Cade, and Donna and I spent 14 hours. We drove from Phoenix real early in the morning as we were driving down to Lukeville, Arizona, about 3 hours south to where that famous crossing is of where the illegals are pouring in. We saw early in the morning, bus after bus, tour bus coming from the middle of nowhere full of people. We got it on video as we were driving down there. Lukeville, there wasn't a lot going on. Border Patrol and a couple contractors were trying to fix the fence. They'd closed that crossing down because the cartels had an epic gun battle, military grade firefight. And so all of the invaders went to a couple hours east out of the Sassabee crossing. So we went to the Sassabee crossing because we were getting intel in real time through social media that there was an NGO camp on the American north side of the border wall on American soil. So we drove, 5 miles on that wildlife refuge, and we saw huge sections of these 8-inch square steel column, concrete filled posts, right? The gate, the wall, where the Americans had cut them out and exposed 12, 20-foot wide sections, laid all these huge 30-foot long posts on the U.S. soil side. So we didn't see a lot when we went the 5 miles in, other than, the NGOs that are putting stashes of water and snacks for these invaders. But we continued around for about another I think it was about 8 to 10 miles in, we went past the Chilton Ranch. It's that famous rancher that's constantly fighting illegals. And we come across that NGO camp. And that NGO camp was being run by No Mas Muerte, No More Deaths. They're a famous, infamous, anti-American NGO that's being funded by the U.S. government, as well as NGOs, Soros groups, the Clinton Global Initiative. And we roll into this camp, and lo and behold, there were at least 30 to 40 that we could see military-aged males from Africa and the Middle East. There was tents all over where nobody was coming in or out of them, but we could hear them inside. And we talked with these NGO handlers, if you will, the ladies at the camp. So there's six white women amongst a lot of Middle Eastern and African descent males by themselves, giving them, aid and letting them sleep there. We continued another 5 miles to the east. And as we were driving, there was never a spot where there wasn't guys walking.
Yeah.
We encountered hundreds of these military-aged males coming down on the U.S. side, no border patrol, nobody watching them. And then border patrol would come through occasionally at nighttime, and they would find any women and children that happened to come through because they're coming from Nogales. It's about a 40-mile stretch between Nogales and this NGO camp. They drop them off, make them walk for 2 days. But the males are being run north through the town of Arivaca, Arizona, which is a heavily controlled cartel town. And from there, that's where James O'Keefe had his guy inside here that he did that video about a week ago. But they're busing them from there overland through buses, through Sprinter vans, taking them to airports, but they're using Snapchat. So the NGOs are facilitating, and the cartels, at using Snapchat. So they'll tell a kid or a soccer mom, hey, you want to make some money, follow this guy. And then they'll get solicitations to run people and transport them. So this is what's going on. And I know that's a long way around of saying what's wrong with Kootenai County. People, until you have seen it firsthand, you do not know how bad it is. And it's coming here.
I guess the one question, NGO, for those that don't know, should probably say what that is.
It's a non-governmental organization. Yeah. They do the dirty work for the U.S. government.
It's probably a lot of that. Yeah. The obvious question would be, like, how does that affect us here in Kootenai County? It sucks, and that's super disturbing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does that affect us here?
Well, I believe it does. And we also have an unsecure north border. So it's easier actually to get into Canada, and then they come across and come straight down into Washington, Idaho, and Montana. But yes, the reason why it matters is if we just take the influx of the 12 million plus, and that number is way off, of folks that have come across, let's just say a small percentage of them, via Spokane and Seattle get up into our area, that's a drain on our resources.
Yep.
Education, medical, first response, you name it. But more importantly, I'm concerned where we have trafficking of children going on. We have the trafficking of drugs. We're constantly hearing about stops where they're getting a lot of fentanyl.
Yep.
So we know that it's coming through this area. And these individuals, these military-aged men, they're not just taking them to Chicago and to New York and to Detroit and Houston and San Diego. We don't know where they're busing them. And the concern should be the what ifs.
Yeah.
So, whether or not you think that illegal invasion is affecting Kootenai County right now, it's not a matter of if, but when. There have been reports of people, credible people in this community, that have seen the white Sprinter vans pull up to Ross in the middle of the day, and these males get out and they're inside shopping for clothes and suitcases. I've got the videos where they've brought them out.
So somebody's giving them money.
The NGOs. I mean, the U.S. government has given these NGOs $1.5 billion.
Wow.
To supply them with credit cards or debit cards and vouchers. I mean, when they go up to Sky Harbor, they have no identification. Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix, and they're put on these planes, and you and I have to take our shoes off in order to go through airport security. And these guys don't have to have even any kind of identification, but they are here. And my concern is that Kootenai County is an area where we're known for our independence and our strength and our conservative way of life. And we're a target rich environment for suicide bombers and other nefarious acts. And look, people can say that I'm crazy, but am I really?
I mean, you have a valid point, right? It feels like we're very far away from that geographically, and we are. But when you talk about people getting delivered in vans and buses, I don't think that's crazy talk.
Yeah.
We know it's happening in liberal cities. I mean, we see it, and I think
right next to Spokane,
they're starting to pay the price for that, right? And as a person that lives here, I don't want to live like that. We moved here for a reason. We wanted to raise our kids in a place with, good old conservative values and feel safe. Yeah. And I'd hate to see that go away.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And that's, again, why I'm saying I want Kootenai County to be that example for the rest of the country. We don't dock somebody because they're from another country. I don't see any signs of racism in our community. People love good people. They support good people, no matter what your background is. But we don't want people here that have already broken our laws to be present. And look, the other thing is human trafficking is a huge issue. Yep. Now, I know our sheriff last September made a statement at a town hall that he just hasn't seen any early warning indicators that there's any trafficking issues going on. You're a man that's been in law enforcement. We're in a county of 170,000 next to one that's 550,000. We're off I-90. We have 3 major casinos. We see the drugs coming through. Are you going to tell me that there is no human trafficking going on?
I'm sure it's going on.
So
right?
All these things go underneath the surface, and we're not looking for them to drive them out. But that's why I say, yes, the immigration issue is definitely affecting us. We just don't necessarily see it.
Yeah. And you touched on like the opioid crisis that's going on. People ask me a lot personally from a perspective of someone that wants to move here, what's crime like? And I tell them like, it's very low compared to probably where most people are coming from. Yeah. And we're thankful for that. And same with drugs, but one of my partners, Eric, he works in local law enforcement, and he's big on getting dope, and there is a lot getting trafficked through here. A lot of it's because this is a major thoroughfare to cut across the Panhandle. It's a short jaunt over to Montana and beyond, and then so that stuff's moving through here for sure. And with that comes human trafficking.
And part of what I have been suggesting, because to just sit back and do nothing is not a solution. To wait for Border Patrol to come up and basically say, yeah, we can catch them, but then we have to release them right back into Spokane or into Kootenai County is not a solution. We need to be proactively going after these NGOs, using the laws that are on the books, using task force to target these NGOs that are trafficking these humans. And we need to make it very, very costly for these NGOs to do business up in Kootenai County, including anybody that is independently giving rides or favors. If you are subverting our laws, there needs to be a price to pay for that. And once we sign off with legal on how our approach is, we have task force. I mean, look at the drug task force. There are things that we have at our fingertips that we can use. But my question is, why have we done nothing? I mean, we saw 3 years ago when Biden was sworn into office, we knew that border was going to be wide open. So why have we not done anything collectively for the past several years to get ready for dealing with what we have now? Offense is always better than defense. Action beats reaction every time.
Every time, yeah. I had a question and it slipped my mind. Something along those lines. Gosh, we were talking about opioids.
Human trafficking.
Oh, no, I was actually thinking about Second Amendment stuff. Total switching gears. Yeah. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure,
where do you stand
why
on
not?
That? Yeah.
Well,
obviously, Idaho is like the mecca for Second Amendment and carrying firearms. Any of videos that we do about guns and stuff, they get big because people move here for that, and they, this area is that.
Well, I'll start by saying I hate when politicians campaign on Second Amendment because I think it's a ruse. I believe in all the Bill of Rights. So you never hear a sheriff saying, well, I'm going to do everything to protect your First Amendment rights and your Fourth Amendment rights and your Fifth Amendment rights. It should be a foregone conclusion that if you are a sheriff in the West, you will not enforce any illegal gun grabs or mandates or red flag laws, anything that infringes on a person's right to protect themselves. So what is my view? I'm not for any kind of gun control, period. I think that Kootenai County specifically, if you are of age and you have no criminal history that would prevent you right now currently from having a firearm, everybody should have a firearm. I also think, though, that we need to have training. You and I both know how dangerous it is to have any firearm without a basic understanding of how firearms operate and how to safely handle them. So I think that the sheriff's office is uniquely positioned to be able to have community range days where you bring firearm experts to teach public citizens that do not know how to safely and effectively use a firearm, where they can come out and learn all the basics 101. You know, we're gonna have parameters and things. It's not just gonna be a free for all, but what better place in the sheriff's office to train its own citizens on how to safely use a firearm?
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a bad idea, actually. I agree with you on that. Like, there are a lot of people that carry guns here. And I think most probably put some training into it, you know, but there are those. I mean,
and you can't do anything about them, right? I mean, it comes down to personal responsibility.
Yeah.
We have lost, the concept that as Americans, we have a right to do a lot of things. We have the freedom, but you also have a lot of responsibility that should be part of that equation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Man, did we cover all the stuff?
Probably talked your ear off.
This is good. I wanted you to.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear me talk. That's why we bring people on. Any other points that people go after you about that you want to bring up, or like any other?
Well, I think we've covered it with the reserve officer. You know, on one hand, folks will say, well, as a reserve officer, you were a mall cop. You didn't really actually do anything.
Yeah.
Others have said, well, if you like law enforcement so much, why did you not go full time?
Yeah.
And, the answer to that is, in the state of Washington with my certification, when I was working for the agencies, I had at that point full authority. You were full authority 365, right? Yeah. Which means that, I wore the same uniform. I did the same functions. If I was dispatched to your place, you would have zero idea that I was different from a full authority 365 cop. So I did put in the time. I put in the work. I did it to the best of my ability. I loved it. I love hunting bad guys. I love helping to bring justice. But on the other hand, because of my successful construction companies, I didn't want to take a pay decrease.
Right.
I didn't want to abandon all of that, 15 years of work at that time. I believe it was close to 15 years. But I also had the flexibility of being able to go back and to serve my community at no cost.
Right.
And I think that there was a real value to the community that, until I ran for sheriff, I kept it to myself. It wasn't like something that I bragged about, because I enjoyed working with good, solid men that I called friends and brothers, and I would do anything with those guys.
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, I just said it, like, I wouldn't do the job for free. And, I'm passionate about it. I love the job. So, I mean, that says something to have a full-time business and go do this, like, that says a lot right there. I imagine you've responded to numerous critical incidents. That was something that came up, like, how, as a sheriff, like, how do you handle a critical incident? Obviously, there's the little details.
Sure.
I think I know the answer to your question, but I mean, if somebody's wondering out there,
how would I personally respond?
Yeah.
Well, we have already your incident teams that show up. The sheriff gets briefed, and in essence goes out and tells the public what's going on and is transparent. I mean, the sheriff, again, isn't doing the arrest. He's not writing the arrest warrants. He's not doing the paperwork that a line cop's doing, or a detective or whatever. So my team that I'm bringing on, I think people will be extremely happy who I'm bringing on as undersheriff and some of my other key positions. But I'm not going to reveal that at this time.
I wasn't even going to ask. I knew you wouldn't. Yeah.
But I want to put the deputies at ease, which means this. If you have been doing the job with honor and with integrity, I'm going to be your absolute biggest fan. I will do everything in my power to make certain that those deputies are taken care of and that they have a career path of their choosing of what they want to do, that they can enjoy and have ownership. But if you're somebody that has been doing wrong, going under the level and doing things that are shady or less than honorable, and I find out about it, you will be held accountable.
Yeah.
But I have surrounded myself with very, very good men and women, and I look forward to bringing folks that already have the experience of this area and this agency that understand the existing culture and all of the nuances to help me effectively be the sheriff of this community. And look, not only do you have to run all the admin side, but you also have to take care of the people, the citizens. And I think that, a new perspective by somebody who has 12 years of law enforcement, and I love the warrior culture. I also understand the business side. I think that right now at this time and place in history, the people of Kootenai County need somebody like myself that understands the business world, understands the law enforcement, understands the base level of what's going on with the people to represent them with the ultimate goal of protecting everybody's right to life, liberty, and property, equal protection under the law. We see no delineators of anybody's beliefs or backgrounds or color or anything. It is equal protection under the law.
Nicely said. Do you have, since you run a full-time business, do you have time for this job?
Well, I'm here with you right now because my folks are back negotiating contracts and taking care of all the admin. I got carpenters in the field and guys in the cabinet shop. So yeah, they've been working with me on this exit plan, if you will. The primary is in a couple weeks. We make it past the primary, then we go into the second phase. And so, yeah, we have people there that understand our mission, our culture. They are taking things on their own initiative and they're making things happen. So,
yeah. Okay. I got one more question.
All
right. We already talked about what happens if you win day one. You're going to go in and I think that's a good plan. What happens if you don't win?
If I don't win, I'm going to retire. I'm going to stay at home smoking cigars and drinking good bourbon and good scotch. No, I'll find my way, probably consulting. I do a lot of consulting on the side as well. So I always have multiple things that I'm involved with. I do actually expert witness services for attorneys on construction defect. So I mean,
cool.
You probably understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you make another run at sheriff?
That's wow. Probably, I don't know how to answer that because that's 4 years down the road.
Yeah.
I mean, if things change and, we right this ship, and my biggest concern has been once we saw Biden come in and we saw the end run around the Constitution in 2020 with the COVID crap, all of these things, we should have been getting the county ready. We should have been getting our citizen posse ready. We should have been getting our deputy reserve program ready. We should have just been getting this county secure so that we could take on another onslaught of feds, globalists, state people that want to try to take away our rights. Yeah. And, really, if the current sheriff were able to right that ship after an election, I'd be a big supporter. I don't have a lot of confidence, though, because, Bob Norris has spent most of his career when he was at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office being a DHS, dude. So he was working under Homeland Security. He's got a lot of tight ties with his federal counterparts. And I think that in Kootenai County, that's kind of a dangerous thing. We want a delineation between somebody that's spent a lifetime working hand in hand with the feds versus somebody that can come in and say, okay, I understand your place, but we are sovereign here in this county. And we're going to be looking at things from a county level, not just a federal level, because I think the federal and the state level are our biggest threats right now to our civil rights here in Kootenai County.
Yeah. Okay. So. Well said, man. It has been, we're almost at an hour, believe it or not. It's been a pleasure to get to meet you and get to hear your side of things, because I haven't had a chance to sit down with this. And that's what I love about this format, is that we can sit here and BS for an hour, and now I know so much more about you, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I thank everybody for watching. And if you want to know more about Dan Wilson and my campaign, you can go to theidahosheriff.com. That's our website. And we are on every one of the social media platforms, The Idaho Sheriff. So Come check us out.
We will link that in the description on the podcast episode too, so you can find it that way as well.
Great.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. Boom.